So a little bit about me. Karen kind of alluded to some things. I'm a consultant to the med device industry. I've been in the med tech space for over 30 years now, plus an additional 7 years in the IT or the computer industry before that. I do a lot of consulting to small, medium-sized companies, particularly startups that are just trying to figure out how to get on the market. My organization, I'm more of the quality system guy. We have somebody in regulatory, we have people in clinical, so we cover all of it to help these companies get started. But I've done, my students once termed this the grand tour because I worked at Medtronic, St. Jude Medical, which is now Abbott, and Boston Scientific at different times in my career. Yep, so I got the trifecta. Yeah, that's the other way to think of it. As well as a lot of, through my consulting, I work with a lot of different size companies in different spaces, not just the manufacturers, but the contract manufacturers, the component providers, service providers, and things like that. And then as Karen alluded to, I'm part of St. Cloud State. We're in the St. Cloud State Graduate Center. I'm part of their MedTech Quality Master's Degree program. I actually helped develop that program and develop 4 of the courses, which I still teach. So I keep myself kind of busy, which gives me lots of opportunity to present, which is what this is really based on over time. By education, I'm a mechanical engineer. I have never, ever held that title, though. As we know, our careers sometimes take weird journeys. I got the degree and then never got a job in that space, which has been just fine. It was tough to explain to my mother what she paid for when I got out. So otherwise, so what we're going to cover tonight. We're going to talk about how to get prepared, and that's a big part of it. And I think that kind of gets back to the, what Karen just shared. You have to start, and then you have to keep doing it. The preparation is what's going to make it more comfortable getting there. And we're going to talk. There's a lot of preparation that's actually required. Visualizing your message. Of course, everybody wants to make slides. PowerPoint's usually the de facto tool. We'll talk about what makes good content in your slides, and then of course you have to say something. So then you have to deliver that message. The slides don't tell the whole story, or they shouldn't tell the whole story, and we'll talk about that as well. So we'll talk about good tips and techniques for presenting your information well. As I said, we'll leave time at the end for questions, but you're encouraged to ask throughout. Depending on how the time goes and number of questions, there are some bonus slides at the end that have to do with presenting virtually, which is the thing to do now, or just the way life goes after the pandemic. So we still have time, we'll go through those slides, otherwise you'll have them available to you when Karen sends out the slides. All right, so just a quick chance to feel out, who's in the room. We're not going to do the go around the whole room thing, but I want to get a sense for how often do you have to do presentations or speaking in front of other people. So online, you can use the hand raising gesture. How many of you do it rarely? Okay. How about if you do it once in a while? Okay, and how many of you do it a lot? Okay, so online, quite a few people said online, but here it was the once in a while. But I didn't get any rarely, so that's good. All right, so what are the challenges you have when you're doing that? And this is where online you can just open your mic if you want to say something. But what are the things, what are you hoping to take away from this that you don't feel comfortable with today?
How to make more effective slides and
more effective slides?
Yeah, just better presentations, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. What else?
For me, it's freezing when things don't go the right way that I have planned.
Did you say that again? You were a little breaking up a little bit there.
I freeze when things don't go as planned, or I get questions that I'm not prepared to answer.
Could I call that handling curveballs?
Yes.
Okay, great. What else?
Mine's similar to that, I think, Steve, as to where I always think I'm gonna forget the important things I want to say. And I don't know, and so my notes sometimes get long, and then they're too long that I can't find what I'm looking for.
Okay. challenges up there. I know, you asked people when they registered to provide something, and I know somebody said something about kind of keeping things on track. I don't know who that was, but that one probably makes sense as well. Okay. And anything else?
Yeah, I will talk about the very beginning. Sometimes you are intimidated by the public you are presenting to get into the presentation itself at the beginning is kind of
Kind of getting into the groove.
yeah.
Kind of thing, yeah. Getting your rhythm, right? Yeah. Got it. All right. Anything else before we move on? Those are all pretty typical. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Is somebody online?
Yeah, this is me. So one that I was running into is talking too fast.
Ah, there's a good one.
Another one would be having the right amount of detail for the audience.
There's a very good one. Okay. There we go. Got it. Excellent. All right, good. All right, so you're all here for really good reasons, and hopefully we will touch on all of this, and you'll come away with some better understanding of how you might tackle some of those issues. So I'd like to start with a little humor, just to kind of level set examples of the kind of things we hope you're going to avoid going forward. So just a quick short video here, just under 4 minutes, I think you'll find interesting. I want to get that, hang on, I want to get that center light off. Yeah, it's off. There we go. Now for the. All right, so let's watch this. If any of it seems familiar.
Quadruple checking notes as people file in, getting the computer ready, and asking everyone to take a seat. Pretending to click something on the computer to cover up the fact that I don't know what to do with myself.
Arriving just in time.
Wrapping up our conversation about a popular TV show we watched last night.
Disdain for popular TV show.
Mediocre icebreaker joke that doesn't quite land. Attempt to redeem myself by making fun of that guy.
Laughing at that guy.
Laughing because he's laughing and I like him.
Not laughing, and now checking out for the rest of the session.
Title, dramatic pause of my presentation.
Question about how long this session will last?
Annoyed, vague response.
Exaggerated eye roll.
Poignant quote from unknown philosopher to kick off presentation in dramatic fashion. Juvenile slide transition to spice things up. Reading a long paragraph exactly as it appears on the PowerPoint slide about a shocking statistic I just learned about, followed by all kinds of vague lingo that no one will remember 2 seconds from now, capped off by 3 bullet points. So. Proudly pause to make sure everyone notices my awesome clip art choice. Out of date pop culture reference.
Correction about pop culture reference.
Defending pop culture reference by citing social networking site no one uses.
Audible sigh to make sure everyone knows this is a complete waste of my time.
Serious and somewhat over-the-top reminder about how important this information is. Unexpected technical difficulty. Embarrassed people can see my desktop background.
Snide remark about how Macs are better than PCs.
Desperate plea for IT guy.
Fixing the problem with an annoyed look on my face so that everyone knows how good at computers I am.
Unfunny video I'm really proud of having created myself.
Texting my friend in a way that I think is discreet.
Clearly aware of the texting. Prefacing a preface of a preface so that no one really understands the point that I'm prefacing. And now, going through a long list of facts, one by one by one. Asking if anyone has any questions. Reminding everyone there are no bad questions. hoping if I wait long enough, someone will finally have a question. Concluding by restating the title of my presentation and dismissing everyone. Excited that someone came back for a follow-up conversation.
Grabbing pen that I accidentally left.
So I think everybody who says that they fear speaking in front of others, they don't want to be that guy, right? They all worry, and we've all sat through some of those presentations as well, and I'm guilty of some of those mistakes periodically as well. I love when he's going through one bullet point at a time and it says typo all of a sudden, or the forgotten last bullet. That one happens a lot. No matter how much you practice, you forget that there's one more thing on the page, and all of a sudden it pops up. So just to get us all on the same page, I think everybody recognizes you've all sat through bad presentations and you're just fearing that that will be you next, right? So hopefully we get past that. Like I said, I get to do a lot of this, presenting, one because of teaching, two because of attending conferences. I get asked to speak. I offer seminars of my own and webinars and things like that. And people generally seem to feel like I do a good job of this, which is why I'm trying to teach it here. And I think a lot of times when we see people who are just good at something, we assume that that's natural. Well, yeah, well, they're good at it because that's how they were born. They were born to be that good at that thing, right? When you watch, somebody, dunk a basketball or make an amazing catch in the outfield, the reality is it takes work to get there. Not everybody starts out being that good. My journey was the same way. I was not naturally good at this. My turning point came in high school. I believe this was senior year. My high school English class, and good old Mr. Kerpick was our English teacher, and he gave us what he thought was a really simple assignment. Just get up and talk about anything for 10 minutes. Okay? I was not a talker. I was a shy, quiet, introverted kid, and this terrified me. There couldn't be a worse assignment for me than this, right? To have to get up and speak in front of. This was an honors English class, and of course you always have that imposter syndrome thing. I don't really belong here with all these smart kids, and now I got to talk in front of them, right? They're going to see right through me and see how stupid I am. This is not going to go well. So I think about, right, so I'm in sheer panic mode at this point. I'm trying to think, what should I talk about up there? Well, I was into skateboarding at the time, and I used to read some books on it. I'm thinking, I'm going to talk about this skateboarding book that, about skateboarding in there. Comes a day when we're supposed to do these, and I'm sitting in study hall before this class, and I've got my speech typed out, and I am just dripping in sweat. I'm in full meltdown at this point, and I can't get my thoughts together. I can't remember what I wrote out, and when I look at it, I go, this is terrible. They're just going to laugh at this, and it makes no sense, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And I went, all right, there's like 26 kids in the class. We're not all going today. Right? So what are the chances I get picked to go on the first day? And I crumple up the speech and I throw it away. And I head to class. We get there, and Mr. Kerpick says, all right, today we're going to start doing our speeches. And so we're going to have Bob, Julia, Steve, and Robert get up. I'm the only Steve in class. So he pointed right at me and said my name, and I'm going third after two very sharp students. Right, who are boisterous and outgoing, and I'm going to look terrible. And so my mood is not getting any better, and my confidence is sinking by the minute. And I'm trying to see, could I dive out a window or something like that? It's only the first floor. I should be able to get out okay. Right, and I'm just going to this panic. Right, and then so the first two get up, and of course they're phenomenal. Right, all right, Steve, come on up. All right, so I go up there. I don't know what I'm going to do now. I threw my speech out. However, I brought my skateboard with me, which I'm now clutching like a teddy bear, right, as I walk up in front of the class. Right, so it suddenly dawned on me, all right, let's switch gears and let's talk about my skateboard, which I built. I picked each part individually. I went through a process of understanding. This is pre-Google days, so I do research in different ways, but I researched what kind of board did I want, what kind of deck did I want, what kind of wheels, what kind of trucks, that's the axle assembly. Right, what other things did I want on that board, color, right, the type of material on the deck that was non-slip. And I started talking about how I made these decisions and why I chose these particular types of wheels and things like that. And suddenly I realized 15 minutes had gone by. And I was getting asked questions and I could answer them, and the audience was engaged with me. They wanted to understand a little better about these things. Well, what are the other options? What are the other type of wheels you could have gotten, right? And we're having a conversation and I'm not sweating. And I'm realizing they actually like what I'm talking about, right? And that's when the light bulb went on that I can actually do this. I got an A, right, which just totally amazed me. I was just happy to live through it, right? And so to get an A was amazing. But that was where, you know, like I said, the light bulb went on, and I realized if you talk about something you understand, it's a lot easier to do a good job with it. Where you tend to get nervous and stumble is when you're not really, you haven't practiced well enough, and you don't actually know the topic, and you're right, everybody's gonna see through that. So that's the first hint, is you better know your topic when you're gonna talk in front of other people. And once you have that, you're like more than halfway there to doing a good job. So that was my introduction to this. All right, so let's talk about all that preparation that I said is really important to do. So if you do this because you're going to try and persuade, you're going to be influencers, basically, right? When you talk in front of other people, even if it's one-on-one, you're always trying to get your point across. The first part of being, you know, persuasive is to be credible. You have to establish credibility. Your audience needs to understand, well, why should I even care about what you have to say? Okay? And that comes through experience over time. The knowledge you've gained from that experience and how you've turned that knowledge into wisdom, right? There's kind of a pathway there, you know, going from, I have raw experience and I learn from that, and then I kind of create from that, right? So that now I have wisdom, and that means I have something to share. But you should be able to demonstrate, this is why I'm talking about this topic, right? As I did early on, I said, well, I teach, I speak at conferences, right? I have to influence my clients. Those are the things that give me the ability to say, yes, I think I've gotten pretty good at delivering messages and getting them out in front of an audience. You need to know your audience more than anything else. Writers know this, right? You need to know who you're writing for. It's the same thing in presentations and communications. You need to know who you're talking to. So make sure you're listening to your audience. That's part of the reason I asked you, what are your challenges? I want to hear, right? Is there anything that I didn't think about ahead of time, and now I got to make sure I covered that? But I want to know who my audience is. Is it going to be a friendly audience? Is it going to be a hostile audience? That happens at times, right? Are they going to be somewhere in between? Is it going to be a mix? Are they going to be technically knowledgeable in what I'm talking about? So do I need to change how I say it? That kind of thing. Or are they going to be possibly even more technically proficient than I am? I'm going to have to really, right, raise my game up here. And from that, you're going to need to be able to make adjustments. Somebody talked about, so what happens when you're throwing those curveballs, right? You'll see as we talk more about preparation, it is about being well prepared and thinking about what could those curveballs be. And being ready to alter your message. Never flip-flop. That audiences will sniff out right away, but you can customize as you go. As you start to realize, well, here's where the audience is, now that I hear the questions more, you know, I made assumptions about where the audience was, now it looks like they're going this direction. Can I stay with them, or can I get them back to me? Right, by subtly changing the wording I'm using, or that way I'm conveying the message. So you need to be prepared and have thought about those possibilities. Continuing on that, you have to be prepared to reinforce your message. So things like having good stories to tell. Audience love this. And whenever I get, you know, the feedback that, you know, when I speak at a conference, everybody gets a survey, right? And then I get to see the feedback. And usually the number one positive thing I get back is how much they like the stories I told. Because that really is what they remember. They'll remember some of the bullet points, but if I tie it to a story, just to an actual event, right, that they're going to remember, and they appreciate that. And they can retell that story. Right now it's not their story, but they can retell it. Oh, we've listened to this guy and he told this story about this. And now they have a way to convey it to others. Okay. So having those available, besides just laying out the raw details, can really augment what you're doing and be more influential. Now, in terms of using data, a lot of times what we do, you know, I think, having looked at the attendee list, a lot of you are in technical type of positions, right? We love data, right? You're an engineer in particular, right? We love to have data. The key is you don't necessarily have to show that to everybody. You have to have it available, and hopefully everything you're going to say is based on some sort of data and actual information. But what you really want to do is hold that back. You want to summarize it for people. You don't want to throw a whole spreadsheet up on the screen and go, any questions, right? You want, because people will try and interpret it on their own and work the numbers. We used to present to a VP and we just knew never give him columns of numbers because he couldn't hear anything you were saying at that point because he was reading every number, checking your math, right? Doing his own calculations in his head and getting lost in what the data was telling him, right? It's like, no, don't show him the data, tell him what we found out. And if he wants to see the data, tell him he can see that later, right? And that's the idea. You do the same thing with your audience. You just say, well, we did testing, we did gather this, we did surveys, whatever. Here's what we found. We have that data, that raw data available for anybody who'd like it, but here's our summary of that. Here's our analysis of that. That works a lot better. The data itself can sometimes also seem harsh. If you're trying to convince people, right, you're trying to influence them, throwing the raw data up there and say, see, is sort of like, and there's no room for argument here. I've taken you out of the equation. I don't want to hear what you have to say. That's usually not a good message to give your audience, that you don't care what they have to think or say. It's just, I'm the smartest one in the room. Here's the data. You can't argue this, right? Be careful of that, right? It can seem, like I said, really harsh. So reserve it, summarize it, right? And then go from there, right? All right, continuing on this. You do need to connect with your audience. Nobody likes to just watch somebody who's very robotic up there, very monotone, or who's not engaging the audience or listening and adjusting as they go, showing that they're paying attention to what's important to the audience. So there are things you have to be careful of. It's a fine line between passion for your topic and anger about your topic, okay? The passion, I find quality systems to be really important. They're a business driver, right? They're not just a necessary burden. That companies can live and breathe and succeed or fail based on their quality system. Versus, if everybody would just follow the procedure as we wrote it, all of this would go great. Which guy do you want to listen to? The first one or the second one, right? You got to be careful. And on the opposite side of that, positivity. You know what? Our quality system is in really good shape. Yeah, we have some things we have to fix, but we have a really solid quality system. It does provide value for us. We're continuing to do improvement all the time, but I think we're in good shape and it helps us stay out of trouble. Versus our quality system is so good. We should like hug and sing songs about it, and we could solve world hunger and all kinds of great things that have nothing to do with the topic at all, right? And people are just kind of going, back off, settle down, okay? So you have to be careful about crossing that line in the level of engagement that you try to convey there and the emotions there. All right, so how do you get here? Preparation, preparation, preparation. That's what it's all about. So as I already talked about, you have to know your audience. You have to be thinking ahead of time. That's why I asked Karen this afternoon, I said, I want to see the list of who's coming. And I looked all of you up. You probably, if you're active in LinkedIn, you're going to notice I tapped your LinkedIn profiles to see where you work. What do you do? Right? If I don't find you there, I Google you. I want to know who's going to be in the room and online. So I get a sense for where is this audience coming from? How can I speak to them? And that helps me think about, and this is one of the issues here, is think about the curveballs that might come. What are the questions that audience is likely to ask me then? Right? I can now think about, if I think I understand who they are, then I can start to prepare for what's going to be their concerns. What are they not going to understand well? What's their level of experience, right? So I can adjust my message, but also be ready for, they're probably going to not understand this part well. So I need to be prepared for these types of questions. And now I can think about what would my answers be, which now comes off much more naturally than, so I get a question and I know. I sort of sit there and now I look like I'm making an answer up, right? It looks like, oh boy, we haven't stumped this guy yet. You know, that's the person you want to be in your presentations. When I get a chance, all I got to do is say hi to everybody as I came in the room. But if there were more of a social hour ahead of this, then I wouldn't hide in the hall. I'd go to walk around and talk to people. Hi, I'm the presenter tonight. What brings you here? What are you interested in? What are you looking to get out of this? Right? See what you can find out to confirm. I made my assumptions based on the names, right, or the type of audience I expected. Now they're here, so I might as well start talking to someone. Find out if I can confirm some of those assumptions about what they're here for, where are they coming from. It takes a lot of work to get ready. This is the biggest part of your presentation, is the preparation. And I usually tell everybody, for every hour you're gonna talk, expect it to spend 10 hours getting ready. And I found that to be pretty true. So you need to put a lot of time. And then the big question after this is, well, how many slides should I get ready? Okay. You'll see a lot of different guidance on this. The typical is expect to spend 2 to 3 minutes per slide. So there you go. If I'm going to speak for an hour, 20 slides. Oh, take away 10 minutes for questions. Okay, so 17 slides. Okay, it starts getting smaller. Do I need to take a break in there? All right, 15 slides. Now you start going, we'll catch up on this later. How am I going to fit this message into 15 slides? Right, it becomes the next challenge. But you don't want to fire hose everybody. Okay? We used to have an instructor. We in our master's classes we're in for 4 hours a night. Right, so that's about 80 slides. And this is a woman. She was the font of all knowledge from the regulatory side of things, and she would literally show up with 192 slides, and she'd go through them in 4 hours, just zipping along, and the students would just be wide-eyed. It was all great information, but it's like, you need to like scale that down a little bit to something more digestible. So you want to be careful with that. And less, the old saying goes, right, less is more. And that usually works out that way. That if you are very succinct, and we'll talk about not overdoing the wording in your slides in a second here, because you're the important part of the presentation. And I'll hammer that home in a little bit as well. The 2 to 3 minutes per slide is pretty normal. Then you practice, actually practice. Okay, it's one thing to create your slide deck. Now you sit down and go through it. Okay, I usually just sit down and I kind of do it silently. I go through each slide and I think about what am I going to say there, and I maybe mumble to myself, and then I go on to the next slide. First, it helps to make sure I got the timing right. Am I going to get done in the time allotted, or am I going to be like way short? Okay. How does my slide content look? You'll see I've got animations in here, right? Things only come up one at a time, and I'll talk about that in a second. I want to make sure that all works. Do I find any typos? I hit F7 and I do a spell check. I always do the spell check. But it helps me see that. Then I do it out loud. I just go through it as if I were delivering it. So yeah, if it's a 4-hour session, I go through 4 hours of practice straight through. I just do a straight run through it. Right? I just set the time aside and go. Is this going to fit in the 4 hours? And am I going to know what to say? And am I still going to be awake at the end of it? Am I going to survive it? I take notes if I need to on key points. Oh yeah. I got to make sure I say this way when I get to this slide. It's okay to have notes in front of you, especially when it's a new presentation. Even when I've done presentations, like I've been teaching in the program for 11 years, and some of the material has not changed, and I still forget pieces of it as I go. After 11 years of teaching the same stuff, right? So I do have to remind myself, don't forget to tell the students this. This is really key out here, right? But it also makes me think, well, wait, should I change the slide to make that more clear, right? So it gives me that chance to look at, am I giving the message correctly? And these days, since we're all very familiar with things like Zoom, record yourself. A one-person meeting, turn on the recording and do a live read through and then play it back and see what you see. You'll be amazed. Yeah.
The thing I might suggest, and I've had to kind of practice it as well, is consider how you take shortcuts on the fly. And what I mean by that, oftentimes you might be in a series of 3 or 4 presenters. You thought you were going to get 30 minutes, but 3 people ahead of you took more time, so now you get 20. So how can you get in the trap of reading just the slides faster?
I do kind of touch on this, but it's a good point to touch on it now. I don't know if it's going faster, right? Then you're the fire hose.
No, but I mean avoiding that.
Yeah, it's, can I say it in a different way and just go, all right, like there's 5 bullets on the slide. I'm going to say 2 things. You're going to get a copy. You'll be able to read the rest, but I'm going to sum all 5 into just 2 statements so that I can pick up the pace a little bit. Or there have been times when I go, you know what, this slide is sort of just reinforcing what I just said on the previous slide. So I'm not going to spend any time on this one. You've got a copy of it. So let's jump to the next topic.
You just have the ability to make that.
Yeah, if I've set up my
by going on the fly,
yeah, I should have those opportunities. Now, the the denser the amount of time, it does get trickier to figure out where, I've had, I got asked to speak in an event once, and they wanted me to talk about the US quality and regulatory system. And, oh, yeah, I can do that. That's great. So I got ready. And so I know this isn't a 4-hour event, but I got ready for an hour. And then as things went on about a week before, they said, oh, by the way, we found the person you're going to be presenting with. And I went, oh, I didn't know I was going to have a co-presenter. And I went, oh, yeah, we've got another guy who's going to talk about the legal aspects. Okay, so he's presenting a different topic than I'm presenting. It's sort of related, but it's not the same. Yeah. So he gets a half an hour and I get a half an hour? And they went, no, you each get 15 minutes. Cover the entire US regulatory and quality requirements in 15 minutes and leave time for this other guy and be nice to him and give him time to talk about the legal aspects. So you do, at least I had advanced knowledge of that, but not much. But otherwise, yeah, and then it gets tougher. What am I going to pick out of this and what can I say? I guess I can't go into very much detail. But if you're caught in that situation where the other speakers have not been respectful of your time, it's kind of thing you might want to prepare for. What if I had to skip something, right?
It's kind of like that
What would I
AMAT
skip?
room. So, what if I had 15 slides? What if I had 8,
Yeah.
Play that game.
Right, if I have the full amount of time, I've got my 18 slides, right? But if something were to go wrong, there's a technical difficulty or someone takes too much time and they ask me to get us back on track, can I prepare myself for what I might skip, right? And how I might describe that to the audience, right? So they don't feel short. But Zoom has made that really easy to record. It used to be, I have a home office and unfortunately sometimes, my wife gets to hear everything that goes on in my business because it's right next to the living room. But it used to be, I would open the doors and go, oh, just listen to what I'm saying here. And then she would critique me. And I have this bad habit of saying right. And she reminds me, oh, she just did it this afternoon. I have trouble getting past that. We all have those things, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And the yums come out, and that's okay sometimes. But anyway, I found Zoom is now just a great tool because everybody's got Zoom or whatever, WebEx or whatever you're using, that you can turn on a one-person meeting and record yourself. And then go back and say, how do I look? Am I rolling my eyes? Am I looking blank suddenly? Am I not moving enough? Now I just look like a talking head, right? It's great feedback to get better at this and get ready. We're still preparing. Like I said, this is a big part of it. So the technical aspects, right? If you're bringing the computer, make sure it works, okay? Make sure the battery's charged. Make sure the battery holds a charge. I learned this one the hard way, that when I'm at home, I have a laptop. It's always plugged in. I rarely take it out. And I unplugged it and the battery said full. I went, great. What I didn't realize, the battery was old and it was not going to hold the charge for very long. It held it for about 20 minutes and then died. Right? I should have tested that somewhere. Okay, what happens if I pull the cord? How long will my laptop actually continue to function? I have like a bit, today they provided the computer, so I didn't bring my bag of tricks, but I have my bag of every type of cable and every connector and converters, power cords and extension cord, in case I get there and the room, they don't have what I need. Right? I have it. I have my own clicker in case they don't have one. So start building your toolkit so that you get there and nothing can trip you up when you get there from a technical perspective. Know how to get in touch with the organizer. You get a flat tire, you get stuck in traffic, okay? The organizer, especially if they have multiple speakers, they're herding kittens at this point. They got a lot to do. The last thing when he goes, what do you mean my speaker's not here, right? So you want to stay in touch and let them know where you're at. And when you get here, hi Karen, I'm here, okay? So that, all right, check that one off the list. I don't have to follow that person up. Now I go find my other 3 speakers, kind of, right? Just have an understanding of who's, helping you get to this point of speaking. Know how to get to the event location, right? If it's not a remote talk. Look on MapQuest or Google Maps, whatever you use, at the right time of day to see what traffic conditions are normally like at that time of day. So because if you check it in the middle of the night, you go, oh, it's only a 30-minute drive. And then you realize you're driving there in rush hour in the morning, and it's actually a 48-minute drive, and you haven't accounted for that. And on time is 30 to 60 minutes early, not 5 or 10. Things will go wrong. Okay, we wrestled with that tonight. We had trouble getting the sharing working correctly. But we were all here a half hour ahead of time, which gave us lots of time to get it right. So that it would be perfect by the time you guys showed up. And so always be there early. And we're still prepared. See if the room is the way you want. I should have probably checked the lights ahead of time, but I was able to at least adjust quickly. Are the tables where you want them? Did you want them? You know, I'm okay with the setup, but you know, if that's not what you wanted, if you wanted, you know, a more conference table kind of setup, make sure the room is where you want it. Is everything working? Does the projector go on, or does it need a new bulb? Is the camera working? Right? Does the PC fire up again? You know, the technical stuff. Make sure it's the way you want it, right? That's going to make you look the best. So you get to play AV person, right? Make sure that everything is going correctly. Then test your slides. Bring your slides up and walk to the back of the room and go, can everybody read them from even the farthest point in the room? In a classroom setting, not as difficult. If you're ever talking in a large hall, you want to walk to a back corner and go, what do my slides look like back there? Because if I'm there 30 to 60 minutes, I still have time to edit my slides, right? And move things forward or make things better. So just make sure, yeah, the audience is going to be able to see what you want them to see. If there are other presenters ahead of you, don't just disappear, go get coffee and go, wow, I got 2 hours till I have to show up. Watch them, because it's the same audience. You start to, again, confirm who's my audience, what is their mood? Are they in a good mood from the first speaker, but the second speaker puts them in a bad mood and then I'm going next, right? I want to know that dynamic. So I would observe and see what's going on. Are they an active audience? Are they going to ask questions? Or are they really quiet? I'm going to have to draw them out, right? So watch ahead of time and see what's going on. Watch, are there any technical issues? Oh, that microphone doesn't sound very good. It's too close. So when I put it on, I want to have it lower or something like that. There's a lot of tips, you know, and things you can refine just by watching everybody else. So how are we doing? Questions so far in all the preparation work to get ready?
No, Steve, someone told me to, you know, practice in my home office, practice in my garage. And if you can go, like if it's here, see if you can maybe at the off hours come in and give the presentation where you're supposed to give the presentation. So that at least you're familiar to doing it in different places. And I thought that, I never.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good suggestion, right? If you have the opportunity to try it in something closer to the type of venue you're going to be in. Again, it's why I always like to show up early if I can, you know, if I can get there before any other speakers and go up on this, you know, I've been at conferences and there's a stage and TV monitors, and I'll get there before anybody begins and I'll fire up my slides and I'll check the sound system. The AV guys are going, what are you doing here? You're not on for 3 hours. I'm like, I just want to make sure everything's good. And, you know, hey, as long as you're here, could you do a sound check for me? I'm going to talk for a bit and see how this goes. So I agree. And it just gets you used to, is there an echo in the room?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Is there, if I step here, there's a spotlight suddenly, you know, I went to a place and it was really high-end AV. I mean, it was like stage lighting. And I don't normally get to do that. And I had to realize if I step here, this Klieg light was right in my face, shining right. So I knew, don't go past that point. It's kind of like why they put X's on stages for people to hit their mark. I had to start to figure out, where's my mark, right? If I want to not be blinded suddenly, you know, by the light. So I agree, that's usually a good way to practice.
The chat online says, I've learned to bring a Bluetooth speaker in case the TV I plug into, or I have to use my computer speakers don't work, or I don't know.
Yep, yeah, that's another good one, right? What are you gonna do if you're relying on the sound system and it's not there? Now, I have a pretty good voice for projection and I can raise that up and I can hit the entire room, but maybe that's not the best approach. So yeah, if you can carry a portable Bluetooth that's got high quality, that'll take over the sound system. I think that's a really good suggestion as well.
Do you really prepare 10 hours for every 1 hour?
The first time I do a presentation, yes. Now, like this, I've delivered this a lot of times. I did about 40 minutes.
So what, in that preparation, what do you do in those 10 hours?
Well, part of it is developing the slides and the content is a big part of it. So that includes all of it, developing the slides, thinking through what's my structure of my messaging going to be, and then figure out how do I want to say it, Well, how do I want to show it? How do I want to talk about it? Because that's different. We'll talk about that in a second. And then, do I get my timing right? And have time to do a recording of myself doing it? All of that goes into that 10 hours per hour. Yeah, there's a lot of work there. But once you've done it one time, the next time it's not going to be 10 hours. It's going to be something less. Like I said, I do this presentation quite a bit, several times a year. So now it's just, I go back through based on previous, delivery. Do I want to change any of the wording? And I did actually do some of that today. I did some edits. Oh yeah, you know what? I've never liked that bullet. I'm going to go change that. And made sure the file was working correctly and the animations come up correctly and everything looks good and nothing surprises me as I go along. So yeah, so all of that is built into that early prep. All right, so let's talk about visualizing that. So there is a trick. It's common in writing and it works in communications and presentations as well. That there's 3 steps telling your story. You start with, tell them what you're going to tell them. Give them the preview, kind of like the executive summary in a document. Okay. You want to get everybody on the same page. Make sure, do you understand why? Are we all here for the same reason? Well, let me tell you what I'm going to talk about today before I actually talk about it. I'm going to give away the ending. I'm going to tell you where this is going to end up. And that seems the wrong approach. Okay? Some people say, oh no, I'm doing a project status presentation and I don't want to tell them that the project's failing until the end. I actually think that's a horrible way to do it. Right? Because as you're presenting, it's going to start building and they're going to start going, this looks like it's heading in the wrong direction. Is he about to tell us that this project is failing? Versus if I get up there and I say, all right, I'm gonna have to tell you about, we are having trouble with this project today. They know, right? Their minds aren't wandering throughout the presentation. They know where this is gonna end up. So I'm gonna talk about what's happening, what we're doing about it, and how we're gonna get back on track. Give them the whole story up front. Now, pay attention to the next 20 minutes or whatever I'm presenting on. And now you understand where we're going. So tell them what you're gonna tell them. Next step. Okay, now tell them, okay, this is the actual presentation. And the last step is, tell them what you told them. Summarize, what are the key points? I don't want you leaving this room without remembering this part. Right, I gave you a whole bunch of stuff. Maybe I spoke for 4 hours. Here's 3 or 4 or 5 things. I want to make sure you do not walk out of here and not remember. Right, what are the important points? So that they don't come up with that on their own and get it wrong, especially when you're doing things like delivering bad news or strategic information. I don't want them misinterpreting it, so I'm trying to control their understanding all the way through by setting them up, understanding where we're going, then talking about it, and then getting them back, and this is how I want you to walk out of here thinking about this. That will, if you keep those 3 ideas in your head, it will definitely help you improve how you structure your presentations. All right, so we started to talk about this a little bit about minimizing slide content. You want to stick to one idea or topic per slide. You don't want to jam in a whole bunch of different topics on the same slide. People will get lost. It's okay to have a slide with 1 bullet on it that covers just 1 point. Get everybody on the same page on that one, and then we're going to move on to another topic on another slide. Maybe that one's got 3 bullets, but it's okay. People sometimes look at that and go, just have 1 bullet on the slide. Okay, that's the topic you're trying to cover, and that's the one thing you're going to talk about that. So the 1 bullet is enough. Right? General rule, not a hard rule, and you'll see I violate this all the time. But the general rule is you want to try to get the 5 or less main bullets per slide. That should be enough to cover any topic for the most part. Or go to a second slide if the topic is that big and complex. Try to keep the wording down, 7 or less words per bullet. Okay? More words are okay in the sub-bullets because you're using the sub-bullets to create further explanation. But first give them, here's the quick gist of this. Here's a couple of sub-bullets that further define that. Then we'll go on to the next major bullet. Right? But you want to keep it very high level so that people aren't spending a lot of time reading and getting lost and not hearing you. That's a big part of this, is how to keep the audience focused on you rather than on your slides. Because if the audience can learn everything they need to know from the slides, why are you there as the speaker? You could have just mailed them the slide deck. You could have just done it as a white paper instead. Okay? The reason you're presenting is because you have something to add to this. The slides just keep everybody on the same page as you. Helps remind you when I want to cover things. But I'm going to talk about them. I'm not going to fill the slide with paragraphs of information. So here's an example of too much text. Remember my about the speaker slide? Right, second slide I put up. A lot of words. Do you remember any of it? Anybody remember what my degree was in? Okay, somebody wrote, okay, yeah, okay. How many years in industry?
Over 30.
All right, some people remember, but there was a lot to look through there, right?
You said it, that's why.
Yeah, right, because I did say it. What if, and there was stuff I didn't say, and you probably did not read it. Like who, I talk about some of the companies I work for, not all of the companies I work for, right? So now, whether that's important or not, I don't know, but this is not a good way to present this information. Is what I'm getting at. I do it intentionally. That's the way I used to do it, and then I realized nobody hears it. Nobody picks up on the nuances. What do I want them to know about me quickly? Okay, 2 columns of bullets. Now they can take that away. Oh, okay, this guy's a consultant and an instructor. He's got a degree, he's got certifications. Oh, and here's how I can get in touch with him. I didn't miss that part. Because if I go back there, it is on there how to contact me, but by the time you read all this, I probably advanced the slide. And you didn't get it, right? Now you've got all of that, and it's much more easy to digest. I can talk to that pretty quickly, right? And keep us all going at the same pace so that by the time I'm ready to move the slide forward, you've already seen everything on there and absorbed it. That's what you're trying to do with your slides, is make sure that people can pick up on it while still hearing you and staying on pace with you. Do you notice anything different about these slides from what you normally see? Anything about the background of the font colors compared to what you used to see? Most presentations look like that. White, dark lettering. That's pretty standard approach. These are not. They use color and lighter text. Okay, there's your more normal version of this slide deck. Again, what should be of more value to the audience? The slides or the speaker? Somebody say the slides? Sorry, wrong answer. It's not too often you tell the audience they're wrong what that one is. You as the speaker, again, are the most important thing. Which one are you more focused on right now? This glaring white image in a darkened room that's sort of filling everything. And even online, you know, if anybody was close to their monitor, they probably had to take a step back for a second if they had the brightness up, okay? There are times this works, but it does tend to have that harshness to it. It tends to make everybody look at the slide and at the screen and not at the speaker, okay? Much more relaxed, especially in a darkened room. It doesn't hurt my eyes. And oh yeah, there's a speaker there, and that's just to keep me on the same page as him or her, right? So I'm much more of a fan of using the darker backgrounds with lighter text. All right, let's talk about text formatting. Got to watch those font sizes. Okay? What looks great when you're staring at it at your screen at home will not look good in the 10th row. Okay? Karen, how's that 10-point looking back there?
I mean, I can see it, but think there's a lot of stuff on there I'm not reading.
Yeah, exactly, right? I don't want people suddenly doing this, and you know, depending if you're my age and you start going, I can't see. Even with my contacts.
It's really light though.
Yeah, it's tough to see. People are often surprised just how big the font needs to be. So, you know, going below 24 point, which seems really big, is about as far as you want to go. Depending if you know your room, you might be able to get away with 20 or even 18 if it's a small amount of information. But generally you want to stay on those bigger fonts. Now here's the part where I'm picking myself. There's a mistake on this slide.
All right, how about virtually, you know, where your screen comes up on.
Same thing, right? You don't know how big a screen people are watching on. So even though they're on a screen, 10 point might not be coming through very well for them. right? They're in Zoom and they're not really getting full screen. They're getting, like, how many times have you sat in a meeting and somebody goes, can you make that bigger? Right? So yeah, you've got to be thinking about what's it going to look like to the other audience. And that could be a way to practice if you can get somebody, hey, I want to get you on a quick Zoom meeting. I want to show you my slides. Tell me what you think. How does it look on your end? Right? Because I know it looks to me, but I don't know what it looks like to everybody else. So you can do that. So I'm really bummed, but can you see the mistake?
32 and 28.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened. I gotta look at that. 28 looks more like 36. Yeah. All right. This is why we practice. Even after doing this so many times, I don't know how that snuck in like that. All right. So even the best of us are, are prone to mistakes every now and then. Let's hope that's the only one. And color contrasts. Okay. Font, you can, like I said, Karen can read that 10 point back there if she works at it. You can get past that, but some of these color combinations, doesn't matter how big the text is. If you pick the wrong combination of colors, again, light on dark, dark on light, fine. Anything that gets closer, light on light, dark on dark, it's not going to do it for your audience. Okay, there might be something cool about that, but what's the goal here? To be cool or to have your audience actually be able to see it? Kind of thing. So you want to watch that. You're good. All right, so what else is unusual about these slides and their fonts?
Like your heading.
What do you mean?
Your heading, your formatting drives focus. It tells me what you're gonna talk about.
Okay.
It's your.
All right, yeah, you want good titles, but what else is interesting about that title?
Well, I think it's smaller.
It's small.
Yeah, how often do you see that normally in presentations?
You don't.
I pull up any of the provided templates from PowerPoint. The title is always bigger,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, not on this presentation. My titles are always smaller than the rest of the text. When was the last time you saw a slide where the title was the most important object on the slide? It's just there to tell you what the topic is. The important stuff's down here. So why do I make that smaller than the title? I can make that title even smaller. I just want to remind you, we're talking about formatting for focus. That's it. Now, let me talk about that in bigger font. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it kind of takes the idea of like books and chapters, where your chapters are bigger because everything falls under that sign. You think that's a better approach?
Yeah, I usually get really good response to this. And I don't remember where I learned this, but it was sort of like another light bulb moment when somebody explained this and I went, oh, duh. why do I want my title in 36 point font and my bullets in 18? How about I put the title at 18 and my bullets in 32? And then people go, oh, at 32, I can't get enough information. You don't need a lot of information in the slide because you're going to talk about it. Right? So you don't need, and I still managed to get, violate the 7-word rule here and still got it to fit at a good size font. I think that's 28 there. Right? But yeah, just, think about it. What do you want people to focus on? I want them to focus on the content, not on the title. All right. So before we move on to the next thing, I know there was a question that came in with somebody's registration asking about the use of AI tools to generate this stuff. I thought that was an interesting question. It's certainly relevant, right? AI is driving a lot of stuff. I have not played a lot with AI tools that can generate slides. Although after I saw the question, I went, oh, I should check this out. I do use AI. If I'm creating a new presentation, I will ask ChatGPT to help me lay it out. I'll say, hey, I got 40 minutes to talk on this topic. Help me understand what the outline should look like. And it does a great job. Right? Oh, yep. That's right. That should go there in that order. So I do think those tools are really powerful. Now, in terms of having it generate the content, I hadn't thought about that before, but there are tools out there. I'm really particular about my content. So the first, I go, I don't know if I want to turn that over to anybody else, because then what am I adding? But on the other hand, I'm just there to talk. right? I just want, so I tried it. I found a site that had a free tool. There were a bunch of them out there, so I'm not gonna push any one of them. And I said, all right, I said, here's what I got. I got, 40 minutes. By the way, let me upload our template for colors and, formatting. So I did that and I said, all right, I want you to use that format. I have 40 minutes to talk about, and I gave it, I came up with the topic, it was something related to quality. And I said, give me a slide deck. And it, within seconds, generated 19 slides, right, for me to talk about in 40 minutes. And it was correct. I thought it was boring. It didn't have me in it, right? But I was like, well, but in several seconds, it produced a complete slide deck for me and it touched on all the right things. I might have to add a few things, right? I mean, it never does the entire job for you, but I kind of went, I'm gonna end up doing a lot of editing here because I'm not sure I would say it that way. And so these tools will get better. So I would just say, play with them, see what you get. But I'd be careful about just totally relying on these tools. I mean, even the developers of AI tools will tell you, don't become totally reliant on this. They're kind of like an assistant, think of it that way, somebody who makes suggestions for you. But you still need to add your piece to it. Decide, how do I want this to look and read and that kind of thing. So even when I ask ChatGPT to come up with an outline, I don't use it as is. I use it to get, oh, all right, yeah, that's what I needed. I need that push forward. Yeah, I'm not gonna do a slide on that, but I get what the other slides are, and I am gonna do slides on those. Maybe not covering the exact things that suggest I cover there, but now I've jump-started the process for my creativity. So I find it really useful there. The other thing, of course, to be careful of, over time, if you have, I don't know how many people have played with any of the AI tools, the more you play with them, the more you start to recognize when others are using them. You can actually tell in the writing. So somebody I know did an article on LinkedIn last week, and it was a great article. And I went, wow, that was really good. But I know that person. I went, that doesn't sound like them. It was perfect, right? And nobody's perfect in their writing. And so I thought, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go give it to ChatGPT and say, ChatGPT, can you tell if this was written by a human being? And it came back and it said, probably not. And it laid out the reasons why. And part of it was because it was too perfect in its logic. It flowed too perfectly. The ChatGPT came back and said, humans tend to lose focus at some point in their writing. Right? They get certain words in there that are, special to them or slang, and there was none of that. And so ChatGPT said, great article, like I thought, but way too perfect. So they said, highly likely that this was generated, at least in part, by an AI. So just be careful, right? Back to that credibility piece. People start to sniff out, this doesn't sound like you actually created this. You start to lose some credibility. All right, so let's talk about now delivering a message, right? So we've got great slides and now we have to stand here and do something. All right. Start on time. As much as possible. We gave a little bit of time for people to log in, and that happens. If there's special circumstances, we live in Minnesota, and if we're presenting on a night when there's a snowstorm, traffic's going to be bad, right? Or you just know, when I was coming here, there was an accident, on 169, and traffic's backed up. Okay, then I'm going to tell my audience, those who did get there on time, hey, by the way, we're going to delay 10 minutes or whatever it is because we know people are being held up here, right? So that's okay, but otherwise, try to start on time as much as possible. Introduce yourself or have yourself introduced, right? Part of that, who is this person? Why are they talking to us, right? Karen did a good job as a master of ceremonies introducing me. I've had lots of times where I go to events and somebody just goes, all right, we're gonna start it, here's Steve. So that's part of why I have that slide. Hi, I'm Steve Gompertz. Let me tell you a little bit about me, since this person didn't think to do that as part of their job. Okay. I actually was part of a conference, and they asked me, I was a speaker, and they said, oh, can you just manage the room for the day, since you're gonna be here the whole day? And I said, that's fine. And then they were sending out guidance to the people who would be doing that, the chairs for each room. And they said, don't worry about things like introductions, just keep us on time and get the person up there. piped back and I went, yeah, no, I want to see each person's profile and I'm going to introduce them and explain to the audience why it's important to listen to this person. And they were like, okay. I said, because that's respectful of the speaker and the audience, rather than just keep throwing people up there. Here's the next talker, here's the next talker. Right? Think about the audience and what they're there for. So again, why should the audience listen to me or you, right, when you're up there? All right, you want to make a good impression. Not going to talk from over here. Okay. Podiums are horrible. They're a really bad crutch for people who aren't, experienced at speaking, because it gives them something to hide behind and to grab hold of, and then they stress and and they feel protected by that podium, and they never feel good enough to just step out and move around and look like a human being up there, right? So I prefer none of this were here in front of me, but I get it. Then it's like, well, then I'm naked, right? The audience can see all of me. You get used to that over time, and you want that. I want to be able to feel free and confident. There is this old rule about standing to the audience's left. Okay, a lot of it has to do with how the room is set up. I could, because I have a clicker. I went to a presentation on this stuff long ago, and they talked about there's psychological studies about that, but the audience prefers to see the person there because we read left to right. So they could read the sentence, come back to the speaker, read the next bullet, come back to the speaker. I get it. But you go with how the room is set up. If they put the podium here, this is where you stand. Right? The podium, I've been in, the bigger the rooms are now, especially with all the digital technology, I've been in plenty of rooms where I'm in the middle and there's two screens on either side of me. Right? That's okay, you get used to it. But if you have the option, stand to the audience's left. There's just something comfortable about that. Look comfortable. I get it, that comes with getting comfortable, right? which can be the challenge. But if you look relaxed and confident, your audience perceives that in you, but they feel relaxed as well. Okay, nobody likes to see a speaker who just goes, okay, I'm going to talk about my topic today. And they barely move, if at all, and they just look terrified. Makes the audience uncomfortable, your credibility is lacking. Right? They want to see somebody who looks comfortable with what they're doing. You typically will stand the entire time. Now, if I'm doing 4 hours, there's no way I'm standing for 4 hours. My old knees can't do that. So let's have a fireside chat, right? Every once in a while, I'm going to take a load off my knees and we're going to have an intimate discussion, and that's just fine. Yeah, and if I need to every once in a while, just lean, that's great, but I'm certainly not going to do the whole thing like this. Let me talk to you about this topic. Okay, that's a little too relaxed. Okay, but generally, find a stance that you're comfortable with, right? Feet at a comfortable width. Body towards the audience as much as possible, except every once in a while you will have to check the slides because nobody memorizes an entire presentation. Okay, it's nice we have a monitor over there, that helps as well. I just don't like that one's too far away. So, which is why I said I don't like this classroom. So, this is one of my classrooms, by the way. It's my least favorite because of the way it's set up. But again, look comfortable, make your audience comfortable in watching you. Keep going on this. I move my hands in appropriate ways. I don't go wild. I used to work for a guy, and I was always afraid he was going to end up smacking somebody in the face because all of a sudden he just gesticulate like that, right? And it's just like, But everybody, regardless of your background, says, "Oh, well, I'm this Italian, Jewish, Polish, whatever," and we talk with our hands. We all talk with our hands, and that's okay. And that helps convey things, right? It helps you to point to things, right? And accentuate. And when you want to make a point, to give that body language that helps people understand you're passionate about something right now, or you really want to hammer something home. So that's okay. I don't have it here on the slide, but I did learn this. I used to be a basketball referee, and they taught us something very important about how to gesture towards players, or anybody for that matter. And you'll hopefully see me do it. Somebody had a question before, and I said, "Go ahead." I didn't go ahead. Do you see the difference? This is accusatory. I spot you. This is yes, please, right? So vertical, palm up. Watch a basketball game, well, basketball season's over. Well, you can watch the women's, right? Watch the referees when they call a foul. They don't go like that. You will see the hand looks like that. That is intentional. They don't want to exacerbate the situation. You can do that in your presentations and in your own body language. Just go, sure, I'd like to hear from you. Okay. I got time. So I learned this the hard way, how big the deal this can be. So I used to manage the youth basketball program in my town. I managed everything, 700 kids from grades, kindergarten through 12. So my Saturdays were pretty busy, running around from gyms and dealing with things. And I'm at a game watching, and I walk into the gym, and it's structured where you walk in, and the audience is all sitting in chairs along this side of the gym, and there's no real room for it. And the teams and the coaches on the other side. And I can see the coaches are like having an exchange with the audience, and I can hear voices raising as I move into the gym. And I poke my head into the door, and I can see the audience is shouting stuff at the coaches, and the coaches are shouting stuff back, and I can't have this in a third grade game, okay? You know, because so much is at stake in third grade in-house basketball. All right, this is getting heated, it's gonna get out of control, coaches are sort of moving away from the benches, parents are gonna get up out of their seats in a second here, some already were. So I walk into the gym, Mr. Director, and I walked in, and the audience behind me, as I walked in, and I went, I need everybody to be quiet. Okay, and then I walked over to talk to the coaches, and I walked back. Now, I just did sort of a sweeping motion, but at some point my hand did stop. I wasn't even looking at her, but it stopped pointing at one person. And after the game, she had a lot to say to me. How dare you point at me among that whole crowd and tell me I need to be quiet? It's like, I don't even know who you are, right? But then I realized that's where my hand came to stop. And that pointing of the finger, right, exacerbated the situation. Versus if I just said, look, I need everybody to be quiet, right, open hand gesture, not pointing at anybody. Be careful of that, setting people up in that way. Right. Using correct grammar and terminology should be pretty straightforward. Where that comes into play is be careful of the jargon, the stuff you're used to. Unless you're really sure it's an audience of your peers and everybody knows the acronyms and the jargon and the lingo that we use, right, among ourselves. But if it's a mixed audience, again, knowing your audience, be careful about using terms they aren't going to understand. If you're going to throw an acronym out there, explain what the acronym means. Even basic stuff. If I'm not really sure who's there and I'm talking to an audience and I say FDA, that's the Food and Drug Administration, by the way, that one should be pretty obvious for most of my audiences, but I'm going to do it at least once. Right? Let's make sure we're all on the same page there. If I know I'm throwing a term that's not very common, maybe it's something new, then I'm going to explain it. AI/ML. Before I use that, I'll say artificial intelligence and machine learning, and then we'll talk about it. Okay. So just make sure you're educating and keeping the audience with you on all of this. All right, now you get to start talking. Okay. You want to read each main bullet point and then expand on it. You don't read the entire slide like the guy in the video did. Again, if you're going to read the entire slide, why are you there? The audience can read the entire slide, right? But here's the thing, have you noticed? I never let you see an entire slide until I'm done. I put up one item at a time. That's me controlling you. I'm keeping you with me. Because what happens if I put the whole slide up? And then I start talking. You're not going to hear what I said about the first bullet because you're still reading the other 5. Right? This is how I keep you with me. Is I will only let you see one item at a time. When I get finished talking about it, then I'll move to the next one and let you see that one. Right? So dribs and drabs. Right? I just parcel it out so we stay on the same pace. All right, this is always the big challenge. Those verbal pauses. We all have them, and you never get rid of them. You can see I'm doing it. Even after years and years of doing this, I throw a few ums. My wife always chastises me about saying right too often. We were just having a conversation yesterday, talking about somebody else I was with says, yeah, he says, you know, a lot. we all have that phrase that we throw in at the end there. They're not terrible, as long as you don't overdo it. What you don't want to get to a point where you seem like you don't really know what you're talking about, so you're going, all right, well, you know, it's like, when there's this, you know, quality thing, situation, something, you know, going on, the audience is going, what is this person talking about? And they don't seem to really, looks like they didn't get ready for this, they don't know what they're talking about. So again, this is why the practice becomes important, and watching video of yourself to see, ooh, look how often I do that. Okay. I don't know, is anybody involved with Toastmasters? See one hand online going up. I don't know if they still do it. I used to attend on behalf of some of my employees who were English as a second language, which I think Toastmasters is great for. But one of the things they do is they count ums and ahs and all that stuff, and they give you feedback. And I thought, all right, it's kind of nice to know that. But what's the right number? I suppose 0, but I don't think that's actually possible. You get tired over talking, or somebody says something and you're still thinking about it, and that throws you off. And that's when you throw in these ums and ahs and things like that, because it's your brain trying to catch back up. Like I said, it's okay to do that periodically, just not constantly. If every sentence out of your mouth has an every third word, you need to work on that. And it usually indicates you're not well prepared, or you don't really understand or believe what you're talking about. So it's a challenge to yourself. So there, sometimes I just like to do it because it gives me a second, right? I think my brain just goes, Steve, you need a moment. Say, okay. And I say it, which is okay. All right. And then keep in contact with the audience. This is a challenge. So when you're new to this, it's almost terrifying to look at anybody in the audience, or to look at the audience, right? You see a lot of new speakers doing this or this, and they just talk to the slide the entire time. Those are not good. But I get it, it's tough to, especially in a big audience. I've talked to audiences as large as 600 people. And that's a lot of faces looking at you. And then there's the challenge of, but I want to engage them. How do I engage 600 people? How do I engage 7 of you, 6 of you here? Okay. Does anybody see what I'm doing while I talk? I keep moving my gaze across the room, and I have to remind myself there are people online, so I got to look at the camera so they know I'm talking to them as well. Okay. That works well because then you don't have that, you can almost not really look at anybody while looking at everybody kind of thing. So if you're afraid to look at the audience, if you're doing this, you don't want to be doing it like this, right? If you're a science fiction fan, you're not a Cylon robot right there, gaze going back and forth. But you want to keep scanning the room. Everybody feels like you're spending some time with them. Right? You got to be careful of a few things. Getting locked on the one friendly face. I may be looking at you a little too much, you smile a lot. We like the person that smiles because we think they must be agreeing with us, right? And so I have to remind myself, don't stare at her, even though I think she likes what I'm saying and I like that. And so, because if I did my whole talk like this and just kept talking to you the whole time, suddenly it gets really creepy, doesn't it? And uncomfortable. And everybody else is going, doesn't he like us? Why won't he look at us? And so that's what I found, right? That constant moving of the gaze can help you avoid that. Now, the other way you can do it, if you're new to this and you're going, I don't know, I've not practiced enough to do that. If you've got a friend who will attend, put them somewhere in the middle and say, I'm going to look at you as my friend. And they go, yes, stare at me the whole time. And at least you're looking at the middle of the audience. And every once in a while, you'll remember to look somewhere else. But at least you've got that face that's not judging you there. And, I've known people who do that. I've known people who will talk later about engaging the audience who will give questions to people ahead of time. Friends, hey, if nobody asks a question, here's 3 I want you to ask so that we get questions. And we'll talk about how that works later. So, but again, yeah, make sure you're sweeping the room. Make sure you remember if there's a camera, look at the camera. And I'm going to talk about it if we have time to do the bonus slides. We'll talk there about when it's an all Zoom kind of meeting and keeping contact with the camera when that's the only person. All right, so let's talk about a couple of vocal mistakes that happen. This is Allison Shapiro. I'm going to show 2 videos from her. She's phenomenal. She's a consultant on communication skills. And I recommend following her on LinkedIn and following her on her YouTube channel. She does all these great short little videos on how to be a better communicator. And they're great. And I've read her book. Her book's really easy to read. So I'll push her book. It's not particularly expensive and it is an easy read. But she's got them. But this is one of my pet peeves in talks. So let's listen to her talk about uptalk.
My name is Allison Shapiro, and I teach public speaking and presentation skills. I'm going to give you an example of uptalk, when our voice goes up at the end of a sentence, followed by what I like to call straight talk, when our voice follows a conversational arch and ends naturally. So here's an example of uptalk, which I hear a lot at conferences when people introduce themselves. My name is Allison Shapiro, and I'm the president of Global Public Speaking. It sounds like a question, like I'm not really sure that that's my name or that I have a right to be speaking to you. Now here's an example of straight talk. My name is Allison Shapiro, and I'm the president of Global Public Speaking. Do you hear the difference? Allison Shapiro? Allison Shapiro. In the second example, my voice sounds more confident and more authoritative, which make me more credible as a speaker. So as you're speaking in public, especially if you're introducing yourself, when people's first impressions of you are formed, make sure that you state your name and your title with authority and confidence, not with a sense of questioning. Now, in some countries and in some languages, uptalk at the end of a sentence is part of the language and part of the accent, and that's okay. But when you're speaking English, and especially when you're introducing yourself, make sure a statement sounds like a statement. It adds to your credibility and authority as a speaker and makes you command more presence in the room. Good luck.
You ever had to sit through a presentation by somebody who's up talking? I sat through one, the entire presentation for an hour. Everything she said was in uptalk. I was like ready to pull my hair out. It was actually off of the organization that was doing the presentation. I said I'd be glad to do this presentation for you people because I said they need it. So that's the first one. Watch that uptalk. Like she said, it just sounds wishy-washy. Like you don't really know if you believe in your own words. It's just not confident. All right, and then the next one is called vocal fry, and I think this one's really interesting. I'm guilty of this one quite a bit.
There's a vocal phenomenon we're hearing more and more. It's called vocal fry, or, as you may have heard it, vocal fry. This is when we speak by constricting the air in our vocal cords. Imagine this sentence, said in a job interview. Good morning, my name is Allison Shapiro, and I'm really excited to be here for this job interview. How credible do you sound? How professional do you sound? Now imagine taking a deep breath and speaking on the breath. Good morning, my name is Allison Shapiro, and I'm really excited to interview for this job. You sound so much more powerful and professional. Now, when we constrict the air in our vocal cords, we're literally taking away the power of our words, the power of our presence. So the antidote to vocal fry is deep breathing and then speaking on the breath so that you can amplify your message. We use vocal fry for different reasons. Maybe we picked it up from other people who are using it in what a colleague of mine calls linguistic contagion. Or maybe we're just lazy and we just don't care enough to take a deep breath, and that's how we sound. But if you have a message, if you have something powerful to say, then take a deep breath and let your voice speak with the power of the words, and you will have so much more meaning and impact in your language.
Sometimes it's tough to remember to breathe. And like I said, I'm pretty guilty of this at times. I get really excited about a topic and I get into it and I realize I haven't taken a breath in a while, and then I start doing that, right? It also doesn't help that my voice is a little bit raspy to begin with. All the men in my family eventually start sounding like Henry Kissinger. But so on top of that, I've got it sort of built in. But yeah, you got to remember, take a breath, pace yourself, sound powerful, right? like she said. She has another video, it's just 1 minute long, and I think it's titled "The Most Important Thing to Remember in Presenting," and it's breathe. It's the whole thing, right? It's sort of a basis for everything. So I think it's important to remember that. But yeah, she has a bunch of videos on YouTube. I think they're all phenomenal. So she's a great person to listen to. All right, so we talked about connecting with your audience. We'll come back to that here. About keeping the audience engaged. We could sit here and, especially when I'm doing very technical presentations, and I could just spew information for as long as I need to. And then eventually people's eyes glaze over and they lose interest. Okay? You don't want to ever see your audience kind of fading out. And the key is you need to every once in a while engage them. Ask them a question. Have you seen this before? What's your experience? With Zoom now, you can pop up polls online, make them wake up and actually have to move their mouse. Things like that. But that's part of it, right? Keep the energy in the room virtually and physically, but keep the audience as part of the discussion rather than just. I always tell my students in the first night of every course that I teach, this is not a lecture series where you just sit here and put in the time and listen to me talk. We are going to converse, right? One of my students. Well, Karen was one as well. Right? Part of your grading is you better participate and talk, right? And that it helps make the entire session go. If you hear what other people have to say, I get it. You hear because I'm the expert supposedly on this, right? But I want to hear what everybody else has to say. And the more technical the topic, the more I do want to hear other voices on that, rather than everybody assuming that I'm the be all end all on this topic. And I do want to hear what other people say. Before, people were opening their mics and saying, well, here's another tip. Great ideas, right? We want to share our own experiences and our own thoughts on this. So definitely keep the audience in there. Again, using anecdotes, telling those stories, right? I could talk about that, that first assignment in the English class and talking about accidentally pointing at the woman in the crowd, right? You'll remember those kind of stories there. So definitely look for whether they're your stories or someone else's stories that you've picked up somewhere else. You could still use it to strengthen your points and really influence people. And keep it humorous, but remember you're not doing a stand-up act. Okay? It can be challenging. Now I talk about quality and regulatory, which aren't usually the most exciting topics. But I think what I'm known for is finding ways to make them interesting and enjoyable and energetic. And that's what you need to do. What's the funny stuff? Can I find a funny story that goes, oh, wow, oh man, really? Somebody did that? Those kind of things. But you don't want to get up there and tell jokes. You want to be very careful. People are very, very sensitive to that stuff now, right? It's so easy to offend people. As your audiences become multicultural, it's going to be really, really easy to step on the wrong topic there. So it's not about finding a good joke. It's just about, we're going to build a little bit of humor into this, some interest that, we'll keep it not quite so dry and technical. There are ways there. You could ask ChatGPT for help. How many people use ChatGPT or something like it? Really? Play with it. It's a tool of the future. You're going to have to get good at it. And it does some pretty amazing things. Last weekend, I taught it to recognize my writing style. So now I can ask it, I want you to write something like I would on this topic. And now it comes out sounding more like me rather than whatever it used before. You can also tell it to write like other people. So I could say, ooh, I want you to write something and make it sound like Hemingway. Or George Carlin. It's pretty interesting what it'll do. The same topic, you can ask it to have 5 different people write it, and it will do it. So, I mean, for entertainment purposes, yes, but it does provide some powerful usages. But if you're looking for, you're writing something, whether it's a presentation or just a paper or something, an article you're writing, you kind of go on, all right, factually, that's good. Is that going to really be interesting? Tools like ChatGPT, you can give it that text and go, can you make this a little more lighthearted? Or add a little bit of humor in there, or find me a good story to put in there? And it'll do that kind of stuff. So I think that's very useful. But again, keep the humor relevant and just be careful how you use it. Continuing to make a connection. When you take a question, the larger the room, the more important it is that you repeat the question. If there's good speaker system and it's a small room, and you can see that you know that everybody can hear it, and you don't have to, but the larger the room, the larger the audience, it really becomes important to remember that when somebody asks a question, you repeat it to the entire audience. Because we've all been there, right? We're sitting somewhere in a big ballroom listening to a speaker, and somebody asks a question, and you get to hear the answer, and then you try to figure out what was the question. Right? Meanwhile, I'm not really hearing the rest of the answer because I'm busy trying to figure out what did the person even ask. And now I've gotten nothing out of that. So again, be respectful of your audience. They want to hear it's to their benefit. You're not just answering that person's question. You're answering that question for everyone. So the other thing is it helps you do is confirm you heard the question correctly. If you have to repeat it back, because sometimes people are pretty long-winded, right? They could have said something in 5 words, but they said it in 5 sentences. And so now you got to condense it back to something you can answer in a short period of time. And then make sure you actually did address what they were concerned with. So it can be useful to go out. All right, let me see if I can paraphrase that back to you, and so that everybody hears it. I think what you asked was, and then you say, get their confirmation. Yes, that's what I want to understand. Now I can answer it and have a higher level of confidence that I'm going to give them a good answer. And something else that everybody else can take away as well. Don't be dismissive of, I'll call them poor questions. All right, I did say there's that saying, all right, there are no bad questions. Every once in a while there are. Okay, let's be truthful. And that could be this could be things like somebody wasn't paying attention and they ask a question that you know got covered before. You don't want to go, okay, one more time. That isn't going to go over well with that person or with the audience, okay? Because you can create an you versus them situation. The audience is together, and if you start attacking any one of them, or perceived as attacking one, they will perceive that you're attacking all of them. You definitely want to avoid that. You're outnumbered, right? So you want to keep everybody with you. So you know, in your back of your head, you're rolling your eyes, but you're keeping a steady gaze and going, sure, just as a reminder, we talked about this a few slides ago, but yeah, let me say it a different way and answer the question. Just respect that person. Maybe somebody else missed it too, so just be aware of that. But don't just, oh my God, really? You're going to ask that? And don't give that hint away. And that's where over time you start to learn to manage your body language so you don't go. Oops, no, I didn't mean to do that and drop my shoulders. But you gotta, again, that's part of that preparation. What kind of things might I get if I understand my audience? Are there people who aren't going to understand some of the finer points? So either I need to be prepared for they're going to ask this maybe over and over again, or I need to figure out how to explain it better so they don't have to ask. Right? It's an iterative process to get good content and get prepared for your presentation. All right. The longer you do this, at some point you will encounter a heckler or some version of the heckler. Right? The heckling could be somebody, there are some people that's just, they just love chaos and that's their whole life is to inject negative energy into anything. Other times, depending on what you're doing, at some point you're going to have to change people's minds about something, deliver a new process, a new way of doing things, something that there may be fear, right? Or disagreement about the approach, right? It's going to be controversial. And somebody in the audience is going to have an agenda different than yours. Okay? Again, understanding your audience and knowing, you know what? I know 3 people that are going to hate what I'm going to say, and they're 2 of them aren't going to say anything, but one of them is. What do I think they're going to say? And be prepared for it. How am I going to deal with that when they come back? And it doesn't matter what I say, they're going to tell me it's stupid. And how am I going to handle that and not let it derail the whole conversation? Because I can't let them take 10 minutes out of my presentation arguing with them. How am I going to deal with that? So one is getting prepared for that. The other way is if they don't let go of it, you get quieter. Not that you're giving up. This could be a time when you just kind of show through your body language. You keep asking the same question. You can even say it. You keep asking the same question. I've already answered it in 3 different ways. I don't know what else you want me to tell you. You're not getting confrontational with them. You're just saying, I don't know where else you want to go with this. At some point, the rest of the audience, assuming they don't agree with that person, is going to come to your defense. I've been in meetings where somebody just keeps up and they start monopolizing the conversation. And I've had somebody else in the audience going, Dave, will you drop it and let him continue? so we can get out of here on time. If for nothing else, right? They just want to get out on time. So, and that has worked. I got taught that in a class like this, and then I've actually used it and had it come to my defense. The other thing again is knowing your audience. You know they're generally gonna be receptive, but you know there's that one person who's gonna hate this idea. I had to redo the entire design control process for my company. There's gonna be no controversy there. And I knew there was a guy, and the previous version was his baby. So I basically just killed his baby and replaced it with mine. And no matter how many preliminary talks I had with him, I knew he hated everything that I came up with. And we're gonna teach now everybody this in the company. Again, understanding my audience, I made sure that the leadership team was in the first presentation. And they were on board. And I let them take care of him. He asked this question, pushing back. Steve, you know that's just gonna slow down our projects and we're gonna miss OLED. I had an answer ready for that. No, because we're gonna do this, we're gonna save time here. Yes, you're gonna spend more time up front, but you know, the typical do it right first and the rest will go more easily. And I just stuck to that theme and all that. And he wanted to keep coming back at it. And eventually the CEO said, Dave, can I talk to you in the hall for a second? Took him out in the hall. I got to go on my speech. So again, part of that getting you all ready and understanding your audience could be aligning people ahead of time that will be on your side, or at least being prepared for. I know where people are gonna get upset, and now I know how I wanna word it. It still may get ugly, but now I know I won't look flustered, I won't make it combative, I'm ready for that. And all I can do is present my point. And sometimes the audience doesn't go there with you. And that's fine, and we're gonna move on, okay? Do acknowledge valid challenges. Somebody stumps you on something you didn't think about. Because there's always gonna be somebody in the audience who probably knows a little bit more than you possibly about your topic, right? And you could have missed something. And if that happens, you don't wanna suddenly try to make something up on the spot and stumble. Now you're gonna start stuttering and, you know, and looking, your body language is gonna change. It's okay to go, you know what? I didn't think of that. That's a really interesting thought. I need to think some more about that. Let's talk about that later, you and I. And then I'll make adjustments as needed. Just acknowledge it. Somebody had a good idea. Get them back on your side. Yep, I'm gonna listen to you. This isn't all about me. I am gonna engage you as well. All right, breaks. If you're gonna go longer than 90 minutes, then get a break in there. Okay, we're gonna go a little bit over 90 minutes, so we're not gonna break. But you know, if it's a 4-hour session, it's an all-day session, right? You definitely want to build breaks in there. And I would show that on the agenda slide up front, let them know. Yes, we are gonna take some breaks here, right? 10 to 15 minutes is usually plenty. You don't wanna go longer than that, because then people disappear, they start getting too involved with work and emails. 10 minutes is enough to go to the bathroom, grab a donut, some coffee, whatever, and then come back a little bit more energized. So first break should be about 90 minutes, right? After either the start of a presentation or after a lunch break. Sometimes, depending on what's served for lunch, I might make the first break an hour later. If it's a heavy lunch, they're gonna fall asleep pretty quickly. So 60 minutes, get them out the door and moving around again, right? So they can get re-energized. And when they come back, don't just jump back into things. Got to find a transition back into the talk. Good time to bring up a video, Q&A, a poll, anecdotes, right? Something to sort of ease them back into the topic. All right, we left off here on point 56. Let's go to point 57 right now. Oh God, this is never going to end. Right? All right, let's talk about this. Okay? Put up a cartoon. I use cartoons a lot. Right? I know Dilbert has sort of fallen out of favor, but he's still got really good cartoons, and I will throw a relevant Dilbert cartoon up to kind of lighten the mood and get everybody back in things. All right, and then finally you get through it all. You got to wrap it up. To your point, be respectful if there's other speakers or just of people's time and get done on time, as close to it as possible. Right? That's why I look at my watch every once in a while. Although I look at that clock and I go, I got lots of time. No. Be careful about saying finally or in conclusion unless you really mean it. Okay, that means that there's less than 10% of the time. I remember being in one of those where somebody goes, and finally, and 20 minutes later, you're going, didn't he say finally? Why are we still talking? Because it doesn't sound like he's anywhere near the end of this topic. Right? And it's just like, because when you say that, people get ready. They're ready for that home stretch. Their energy comes back up, and I can make it for that next 10 minutes while we close this out. And you go past 10 minutes and you're going, oh, I don't trust you anymore. Yeah, you lie. And then, like we saw this in the video, waiting for questions and none came out. Okay? You could do that where you just sit there and go, I'm not moving. I'm not dismissing you until I get a question. And that sometimes will work. Sometimes eventually somebody will say something, but it's usually better to have a question for the audience. All right, we talked about this. Does anybody have something to share what you've done in that situation? Right, to draw them into the discussion. Because once you break the ice, once that first question comes out, the others start coming. Just nobody likes to take the first donut, right? Especially if you're in Minnesota, right? Minnesota nice becomes a big thing, right? You got to understand that. So you got to get them to talk. And then don't rush off. Okay? Some people, whatever ice you break, will never raise their hand. They just simply will not ask a question in front of others, but they have questions. So stick around so they can find you in the hall afterwards or in the back of the room getting treats or whatever. And that's when they'll do it. I gave a presentation once on a new approach to evaluating the quality level of the quality system. And it was something I came up with and made it more quantifiable. And I gave this talk and huge audience. And I got done and I said, so any questions? And crickets, nothing. And I hadn't prepared to draw any questions out of them. And it was right before lunch and I went, all right, I guess everybody wants to get the lunch. So thanks for coming. Right? Everybody gets up, starts shuffling out like that guy, and I turn around and I'm grabbing my papers. Right? And I turn back around and there's a line of 10 people in front of the podium. Right? Then they wanted to do one-on-one questions. And then the last guy in the line, I said, let's walk the lunch so we don't miss it. And you can ask me a question there. And I said, well, let me ask you a question first. Why is it everybody waited? And I asked if anybody had questions. And there were 10 people with questions and nobody said anything. And what he said was, what you talked about was so different than anything else that anybody's experienced. I don't think people understood yet how to put the questions together. They had to take a moment to think about what did they actually want to ask you, right? So I hadn't failed. I actually had succeeded in getting them thinking, but so much so that they were just like, I have a zillion questions. I can't come up with just one, right? Let me give me a second and I'll catch up. But stick around. Don't just rush off, right? And there's another speaker maybe coming on after you. Don't go home, right? Stick around, get to meet your audience and see if there's any more questions. And it's just sort of common courtesy. Anybody hands you your card, you should follow up with. And when you're done, you thank the audience sincerely. All right, thanks. Okay, should be. I really appreciate you spent some time here listening today. I appreciate the questions. Thank you for coming. Right? And then thank your organizer, because getting a chance to speak in public is an honor and it's an opportunity, not a punishment. It may feel like that until you get better at it, but you want to thank people for giving you that opportunity to share what's on your mind. All right. I told you what I was going to tell you. I told you. Let me tell you what I told you. Okay. All right, some of the key takeaways. There's a lot of preparation. You can never do too much preparation. That's what's going to get you through a lot of these challenges, because it'll give you time to think and set up in your mind some of the situations you might run into. Beyond just having good slides and knowing what you want to say, you'll be prepared for what other things are going to come at you to handle those curveballs and that kind of stuff. Again, that comes from knowing the audience as much as you can, right? Maybe you don't get the opportunity to get a list of the attendees ahead of time, but maybe the type of conference you're speaking at. Okay, I spoke at a clinical operations conference. I didn't get a chance to see the attendee list, but I went, okay, they're all clinical operations executives. I understand a little bit about what they're concerned with. They're not regulatory people, they're not directly quality people, they're clinical people. I have to think about what are they gonna wanna know from a clinical perspective about the topic I'm gonna talk about. It was risk management related to clinical trials. Okay? So I was able to get ready for them in some way. Practice, practice, practice. You will never waste time practicing this in some way. Like I said, try recording yourself though. It's really eye-opening. But if nothing else, do an actual live walkthrough of your presentation. Don't forget to tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them what you told them. When you're putting your presentation together, just think about that. How am I going to do that? Don't let the slides distract from you. You're the important element of the presentation. But the slides do have to be good. Bad slides will take away from you. Slides that contain too much content will distract from you. So you do need to come up with good slides, but don't make them the focal point. Now, a lot of times what I get, right, because more and more I lean out my slides. I spoke at a conference last year, and they were very particular, the organizers were very particular about the template to use and the structure of the content. That they were adamant you would not use more than 3 bullets per slide, and your bullets would not have more than 5 words. That wasn't a suggestion, that was the rule, right? So what I ended up with was a lot of 1 bullet slides. But I realized, right, because they understood, you're the one we were inviting, not PowerPoint. Your PowerPoint just is put a topic up there and then talk, right? And I started to realize that. Now, you'll get pushback. Some people go, yeah, but then what good are the slides to me later? Well, you should have been listening to me and absorbing that and taking notes. Kind of thing. Other times people go, it's not supposed to be a transcript that they can read back later, right? That's when people go overboard in their slides because they think that's what people want to take away. Well, then you didn't need to be there. And they didn't need to be there either. You could have just sent them the whole thing and just said, yeah, just read this, you'll understand. Okay? So be okay with minimal content in your slides. Make a good impression, look comfortable, dress appropriately. Okay? If I had shown up in flip-flop shorts and a Hawaiian shirt, I don't know if that would have gone over quite as well. Okay? But I didn't put on a 3-piece suit and a tie. What do you do if you're not quite sure what your audience is going to look like? But the first time I went to one of these kind of training sessions, the person said, dress up because you can take stuff off. You can take the coat, the suit coat off. If you get out there and you realize nobody's got a tie on in the audience, you can take your tie off before you get up on the stage. You can casual yourself down a little bit to look a little bit more like the audience and reflect them. If they're all sitting there in flip-flops and shorts and Hawaiian shirts, you're not going to have a costume ready, but But again, then you would definitely want to take your suit coat off and your tie off and loosen up and roll up your sleeves and look a little bit more comfortable. Right? Again, don't just talk at your audience. Engage them. Think about, what do I want to ask them? Even if it's rhetorical questions, at least it gets, oh, he's talking to us all of a sudden. He's actually asking me to think about something, even if he doesn't want the actual answer at this time. Don't forget to have fun with this. Again, it's not a punishment. It's an opportunity to show what you know. You might speak about something you know about, okay? Or learn what you need where you have gaps, and then get ready to have some fun with it and share and be confident that you have something to say and people will want to hear it and engage with you. So I do appreciate your being here. We are at the 8-minute mark. So I do have those bonus slides. I don't know if you just want to switch the questions or you want to go through the bonus slides. Oh, I just noticed, Bradley, you have your hand up. Did I miss that you wanted to ask something?
No, that was his Toastmaster.
Oh, that was a Toastmaster response? Okay. Well, first, so are there any questions?
Sorry about that. I just had that was from the beginning of the presentation. I raised my hand.
It never came down. Okay. Well, now you're on the hook. You have to ask.
Yeah.
No,
I do have a question.
Oh, great.
So, yeah, I work in a team that likes to use Microsoft Teams, and in doing presentations, it is quite common that the video is off for people. But you know, everybody likes to use the voice in presenting. What are your thoughts on that? And is there perhaps a better way?
Yeah, so I call this Zoom etiquette. Right? And I will, if I'm running a meeting, I will insist that people turn their cameras on. And when we're teaching, the school requires that remote students have their camera on, so we know they're there, that kind of thing. But I always explain it this way. If this were a live meeting, and I walked in and I sat down at the conference room table and picked up my notepad and did this, and talked to you the entire meeting like that, what would you think? That's the same as keeping your camera off. Now, I didn't make you guys turn it on, right? One person kept their camera on, but I think that's gotta become part of the new etiquette. If we're gonna have these virtual meetings, body language is such an important part of communication. I need to be able to see your reaction. I can't see, because, you know, even with just this many people online, it would be tough for me to watch all the faces there. But every once in a while, when I know that I'm gonna say something that the audience might react to, I do like to be able to look and see, do I get a reaction? Besides those of you in the room, when I see what your reaction is, I do wanna see the online people as well, right? Yes, thank you for turning on your camera, Jessica, right? Now I see a smile there and a nod, right? I want some affirmation. We all love affirmation, but it does help with our presentation to make sure we're connecting and we're not missing something, right? The audience, because you can tell when you're saying something important and you get a bunch of blank stares, that's a message to you. I don't think I delivered that well. I better either ask some questions or rephrase, right? And now everybody's turning their cameras on. I love it. I didn't mean the guilt of it, but it definitely helps. But yeah, I use that example of going, hey, remember when we used to meet in conference rooms? What would you have thought if somebody picked their pad up and put it in front of their face? Because that's the same thing as keeping your camera off. Right? And maybe, you know, if you're the team leader or the boss, you just start to say, look, the rule is in my meetings, cameras are on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I actually had an interview a few months ago at the same company, different job. But everybody had their cameras off, so I didn't even get to see the cameras for the hiring manager or anybody. So it was kind of awkward. I was not quite
but that's a little
that.
different, right? You're not gonna be able to force them to turn their cameras on. And
yeah, sure.
It might have been intentional to see how you respond, you know.
Sure.
And some sort of
yeah, no, they actually asked me to turn my camera off. I joined the meeting with the camera
really?
on, and they said I could turn my camera off, and it's just going to be a voice interview, like a phone call.
Oh, okay.
So
they were actually
a little unusual.
Cameras off. That's it.
Yeah.
And I counted that.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you for your input on that. I might try to encourage the team to try to engage a bit more with cameras on.
Etiquette, whatever your mother taught you, right? We have a question here.
Just out of curiosity, you referenced ChatGPT, so how do you disclose that in your presentation as a content participant?
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends on what you're presenting, right, as to whether or not you need to cite your references. You know, when you're doing something like this, I don't know that anybody really cares where the content came from. You know, nobody's gonna worry about it, am I plagiarizing something here? If I were to throw a quote up, I definitely would have, you know, say who the quote was from. But if it's something more technical, and my students know this because I make them cite where'd you get this from, and they have to know now. Even if you use ChatGPT, I need to know you asked ChatGPT, you need to tell me that. So I don't know that ChatGPT is different than Googling something or Wikipedia or any of that, right? You should, when you're doing technical content and you're trying to convey it as your thoughts, you do need to cite where did that originate from if it's not your original thought. ChatGPT is just another source of information to be cited. That help?
Yeah, no, I'm just curious, because it becomes more prolific, right? And I understand.
Yeah, and it's harder to detect, but like I said, there are clues that you can look for, and the more you deal with it, the more you start to go, oh, yeah, that's way too. So here's the, you know, I've played with ChatGPT relative to my courses, and I've always told my students, even before there was a ChatGPT, I always warn them about plagiarizing, because I said, here's the thing, I know a lot of you don't have a lot of experience. So if you answer something better than I would have answered it, I'm gonna be a little suspicious, Where did you get that from? Because I wouldn't have expected somebody with your 2 years of experience to provide me that kind of detail in the answer. That's gonna get me looking to see where that came from. Now what I do is I just reverse it. I say, I know you're gonna use ChatGPT, so I'm gonna do it differently. I'm gonna ask ChatGPT, and I'm gonna have you critique its answer, rather than have you go use it to come up with your answer. So there are ways to do it, but yeah, for me, it's just, in general, it's just yet another source of information. We worried about Wikipedia when it first came. It was always kind of a problem, so it's not always accurate now, it's better. And the same thing happens with AI tools. They do hallucinate, as they refer to it, and give wrong answers. I've encountered that several times.
Well, regardless of the source, are you still accountable for content?
Yeah, I think how you come up with the content, whenever you generate anything of content, it's always based on something you learned somewhere else, right? It's like I showed earlier, right? You have experience, which becomes knowledge, which you turn into wisdom. But it was based on knowledge you gained somewhere else. It's rare to generate something completely new that you can't really disassociate from any basis. It was based in something. Even if it was something your mother said to you, right? It had a basis somewhere else. We were all just building on people before us. So I don't get too worried about where the content came from. But if it's not your original idea, then I want to know that it was there. Other than just general, you got that because we talked about it in class. I don't make people say, well, you said on Tuesday night, they don't need to cite that. Based on your presentation Tuesday night, I can recognize when they understood what I told them, and that's the kind of stuff I do want to see. But if they go out and they found a white paper online, or they ask ChatGPT, or they use Wikipedia, then I want them to say, well, according to Wikipedia, this concept is this, and then I always tell them, the next sentence has to be, which in my opinion means, now they get to add on to that. And the same thing should happen with ChatGPT. Other questions? Rain's coming down, you don't want to leave right now if you're here. So, we are right at the 8 o'clock mark. So I'm gonna just breeze through to show you what's in those slides, but you'll get those.
I've got a question here real quick before you jump into that. Hey, so there's a lot of times where when I go to do my presentations where my laptop is like too far off to the side, just because that's where the hookup is for everything, and it just doesn't reach to where I need to be. And if I keep my notes for the presentation on my laptop, I can't see them for where I need to be. So a lot of times I'll actually have like an iPad in my other hand. Is that kind of a good technique, or would you find that to be like too distracting that people might see that waving around? Because I talk with my hands all the time too.
No, I think
Being
holding
too
your,
distracting,
the
or
question was if your laptop with your notes on it is too far away to see, kind of like I was complaining about this monitor. You're saying then he'll keep an iPad or something with him. To me, that's the equivalent of the days when people used to talk and they'd have 3.5 by 5 index cards in their hands. Actually, I just went through a conference and a guy walked up and he had his stack of cards in his hands. I wasn't put off by that, right? It was a very technical presentation. It's a lot to memorize, and I think that's okay. And the iPad would be the new version of the old paper equivalent of index cards in front of you, or a sheet of paper. So I think that's fine. As long as you're not staring at it the entire time and reading off of it like that, which is unfortunately exactly what this guy with the index cards did for his entire talk. He read everything on the card, and by the way, everything on the card was the same thing that was on his slides, and he just read it word for word for word.
No, thankfully I'm not doing that. I'm just using them as, the bullet points on stuff that I need to hit, and I'll just quickly bring it up and do that. Yeah, I'm not staring at it, talking to my iPad.
Yeah, people do that all the time. You'll see presenters just have a piece of paper in their hand and they just remind themselves, slide 13, make sure you say this, right? And they know to look down and quick, but then they continue to engage the audience, right? And that paper is not that distracting. And so I don't think your iPad would be either.
Okay, just want to make sure, since that's a little bigger than a 3x5 note card. So
yeah, no, I get it. But I think people are used to that, right? I mean, we know what the hardware looks like now, and Great. Other questions before I just kind of breeze through these real quick so you can see what's there? All right, it's just some quick visual stuff. Talk about this. We were just talking about turning your camera on, and that's what this slide is supposed to be about, right? Rather than putting up a still picture using video. Making sure you look at the camera rather than off to the side. I always recommend turn off your self view. We're all egotistical. We all are fixated on our own image. And if you're using multiple screens and the presentation is, and the camera are here and the participant videos are all here and your picture's there, you are going to look at yourself and not at the camera. A lot of times what I do is I narrow down to just me and I put that underneath my camera. Then I know I'm going to look at the camera because I'm going to look at my own face. Putting the camera in the right position, it's pretty important. Okay. Getting the right framing is important. Okay, look at that. Lighting. Halo lights are not just for teenage influencers. Go buy a cheap one. I have one, right? So that I get my lighting. I actually have 2 lights, so I can create light in multiple directions and get good light on myself. Know where you're standing. If you have to be standing, don't get too far away and disappear into the shadows. Watch your backgrounds. I'm very proud of that picture, but it makes a terrible background. Right? It's very distracting. Be conscious of what you're wearing versus your background. And if you're using a virtual background, it doesn't work well when you're far from the camera. It can't find all of you, and we'll cut you. And then there's just other stuff. We've all been in those meetings where somebody walks behind somebody, or the cat wanders by, or they have a window open and the lawn guys show up, and now there's a lawnmower going in the background. And so just that kind of stuff you should have these days. I got it early in the pandemic. We were all sort of new to it. Now everybody should know we're going to be on a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting at some point. I need to have a space where I can do that and do it well. This is always my favorite. Anytime you watch a news program, they're interviewing somebody who's in their home office, and all of a sudden their phone starts going off and their email alerts are going off because all their friends are going, "Hey, you're on TV." Like they don't know that. And there's all these dings and stuff. So shut everything off, right? So that it doesn't distract. Otherwise, so there's just some bonus stuff. Anyway, thanks for hanging out an extra 5 minutes. Karen will make sure you get the slides. My company contact is on here. Earlier was my contact. I love getting questions after the fact. So if anything comes up, send me an email. Follow me on LinkedIn, follow my company. We love that. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.